Yeah. I mean, it's really cool to see how many people are building so many different things on layer two. To some degree, it feels like these are headed in slightly different directions, and maybe that's okay. These experiments are just, people are just running new ideas and seeing whether they work or not. But I wonder, what is your view on whether or not it's important to focus more on scaling throughput of Bitcoin transactions, or adding new privacy features, or adding new securities on Bitcoin? Like, where do you think the community should be headed? If you could kind of like nudge this layer two community and say, hey guys, let's focus on this. What comes to mind for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think like I don't think I have a good answer because I'm too much of a, well, let's just see, like let's everyone experiment and see what sticks because like I think that the truth is that most layer twos, so like Liquid still uses a blockchain, so like the scaling there is kind of like that probably won't fit the next billion people coming onto Bitcoin, right? I think when a lot of people talk about scaling, and I know like Liz Stark from like Lightning Labs, if you listen to her talk about Lightning, the thing that she says publicly in her talks is like we're taking Lightning to the next billion people, right? Like we want to make Lightning such that the next billion people can get onto Bitcoin, right? Um, so I know that they're really focused on the scaling story around Lightning. Brought that up for a reason. So like, okay, so like if we take that as like the goal, like okay, how do we get the next billion people onto Bitcoin? Like removing like it necessarily has to be on Lightning. How do we get the next billion people to be transacting with Bitcoin in like a decentralized way? So just like we could just put everyone, we just say everybody give your Bitcoin to Coinbase. We're just gonna use their database. All billion of us will fit in there. It'll be great. We'll all just be on the Coinbase database thing. And that'll scale Bitcoin. We could scale Bitcoin that way. But that's problematic from a Bitcoiner standpoint, right? Because you have this trust in Coinbase then. And then if Coinbase went away or got raided by the US government or something, like, got in a court case and had to hand over all its Bitcoin, then everyone who had the next billion of us with like our Bitcoin on Coinbase would be, what's the phrase, shit out of luck. Right. So
Yeah.
that's like an easy scaling solution, but it's not very useful. So what are like some of the other ways you could get a billion people? Well, Liquid probably wouldn't be a good place to put like the next billion people, right? Because it's a blockchain and at some level it can do a lot more throughput um than the main base layer can, but it will probably take, it's probably too many people for that particular system, right? So then it's like, okay, well, can Lightning fit a billion people? You start getting into kind of some of the intricacies of how Lightning works exactly in terms of how Lightning channels function and that sort of thing. I think a lot of people will tell you that getting the next billion people on Lightning is going to be quite challenging and take a lot of on chain transactions. So that actually is going to be quite expensive and take a long time and fill up a lot of Bitcoin layer one blocks to get a billion people onto the current version of Lightning. So then you're like, okay, well maybe like an eCash token can bring the next billion people onto Lightning or onto Bitcoin. What does that look like? Because eCash tokens are really easy. It's almost like, to some extent, it's almost, I might be slightly wrong about this, but it's almost the same as having like a database entry at Coinbase, but who owns the coins and how you get them out. And Coinbase needs to know your identity and you have to be KYC'd in order to get a data entry in their database. Whereas on eCash token, you just use some cryptographic proofs instead of like identity stuff to prove that you own coins. So, like, yeah. So I guess I'm saying like all of these different layer two things, like, if you're looking to get like a billion people into Bitcoin, like how do we get a billion people holding and like able to transact with Bitcoin in a day, right? Kind of like how can we get like a billion people transacting with Bitcoin every day? Um, yeah, I think that all of the different layer twos, I think, start to kind of take different um seem like they have like a different, what do you call it, like possibility space around that.
Mhm.
Yeah. One of the things that's kind of cool though about layer twos that I think is worth pointing out is that there is the possibility to make them interoperate. So maybe it's kind of like trading. Like, so if you think of every layer two as sort of like a claim to some extent on Bitcoin that exists somewhere on layer one, right? So they're sort of like derivatives. Like, maybe I'm gonna get in trouble for saying this, whatever. I feel like there's like certain keywords that like you're not really supposed to like um people get a little weird about because they have meanings and like certain senses. I'm not really sure what like the derivatives market, that's like a whole regulated space or whatever. But like to some extent, they're like sort of like, it's like it's a claim on Bitcoin that exists on layer one. All layer twos to some extent are claims on Bitcoin that exist somewhere on layer one. So this, I mean, puts a limit on how much Bitcoin can ever be in a layer two. Well, every layer two amount of Bitcoin is a claim on Bitcoin that exists in layer one. So you can never have more value in the entire ecosystem, layer one or layer two, than the total amount of Bitcoin that exists anywhere, right? So you're capped at 21 million across every layer two, right? But this is what makes them interoperable, right? Is that they're all worth Bitcoin. It's all Bitcoin. It's just different accounting systems, and you can make these different accounting systems like kind of talk to each other, or you can do trades across the accounting systems. So one of the cool examples of this is Fedimint. So like Fedi, the big project, is working on, or has basically shipped something called the Lightning Gateway, which is your ability to take eCash tokens and pay Lightning invoices using your eCash tokens. And the way that you do that is there are Lightning nodes that will accept eCash tokens and an invoice that you want to pay. They'll pay the invoice on your behalf and take your eCash tokens, right? So they'll do that trade where um they'll have lightning available to pay out, and they will exchange that lightning Bitcoin that they have for the eCash tokens that you have to give them, right? And it's all Bitcoin under the hood. And they take maybe a small fee for that service, which is kind of cool because that conversion is not exactly free, question mark. I don't know, you start getting into weird questions of what does it mean to have liquidity. But yeah, so these layer twos become like interoperable in a certain sense, which is really cool, I think.